Okay, hello everyone. I think that we can start. 13:01. So hello, I hope you're having a good start of the conference. First day, 2 more to go. So today I'll be talking about why you suck at being a producer. My name is Łukasz Hacura, I'm from Anchor Studios, and my first question is, how many producers do we have in the house? Okay, roughly half of the audience. Yeah, the other half hates you. Know that, right? Because you suck. Okay, so that's what I'll be talking about today. And why I'm talking about it, who I am. I actually started in the industry as a programmer. Later on, because there were smarter programmers than me, I became a lead programmer and managed a team. Then there were smarter people than me, so I became an executive producer. And then I was fired and started my own company, Anchor Studios, which I am a CEO of for the last 5 years. But that's only my professional titles. But when I think of what is my trade, what is my craft, what I actually do, I'm a producer. I'm not a programmer anymore. Most experience in my professional career I have with being a producer. I produced a bunch of titles with very various sizes of team, various platforms, VR, consoles, mobile, free-to-plays, premium, you name it. And a lot of that experience comes from failure, obviously, which I'll be talking about of some of my shortcomings and why I suck as a producer. But my experience is not actually in the core of this talk. The idea for this talk came from the fact that I go to a lot of conferences, I speak to a lot of people, and when I say, yeah, I'm a producer, I often get this, yeah, well, producers are kind of useless, right? I mean, why do you need a producer? And I get this every time from every specialist, maybe not every, but many specialists think that a producer tradecraft is absolutely useless in video game development. Because we as producers, we see ourselves as, we have associate producers, which usually help other producers in I don't know, filling out Excel sheets, managing Trello or Scrumwise or any other tool that you're using. Gather information from the team, pass it on upstairs, downstairs, whatever. You have game producers who handle the entire project, entire team, budgeting, scheduling, meeting the deadlines. We have line producers, which actually handle people more than actual products, right? They handle the morale of the team. They handle, does a particular individual on the team feels that everything's fine with him. He's given every resource he needs to do his job. He's developing in the company, etc. And then we have executive producers, which is kind of a little bit similar to the movie executive producers, so the guys with money, right? People who actually fund the development. Maybe sometimes product owners, but they don't know the craft, so they hand it off to some creative director, but they want this input that, yeah, I want it to be about zombies or something like that. High-level producers. So this is what I think we do, right? We make shit happen. That's what producers do. They make shit happen. Now, when I talk to specialists, what they think producers do, they see a kind of a different lineup of producers. And I want to talk about this lineup. I want to talk about, because these are stereotypes, right? But those stereotypes come from some kind of experience. A person, people didn't make them up. People actually had experience working with this kind of people. And they usually think that they do shit, right? It's like they're at best, they do nothing. Worst case scenario, they actually make things harder for everybody else. And the reason of that view, of that difference in opinion about producers is what spawned this talk. And I want to go through all those stereotypes and find maybe yourself or myself in those stereotypes and try to analyze why that actually happened. So the first is forward producer, also known as a forward manager. So this person, at best, forwards the information, okay? At best. Because at worst, he withholds the information or he disrupts the information, changes, right, in the communication pipeline. So the best example is the client sends you an email, the client being the product owner or the actual client or whatever. You always have a client, right, as a video game development, somebody who tells you what you're actually doing and what you're expected to be doing. And so he sends you this email with feedback, for example, and worst case scenario, you don't even read that feedback. A little better scenario is you read that feedback, but you don't understand that feedback, so you forward it to somebody on the team. It's like, it's his problem, right? I did my job, I delegated, right? No, you didn't delegate. You're a glorified router. That's what basically you are, right? You're not an added value in the project whatsoever. And what that does, it disrupts the information usually, and it creates chaos in the project. And basically it means that you suck as a producer, right? So, how not to suck in that way? First of all, the most important thing is you can remove yourself from the equation. I mean, if you're not adding any value, you're only forwarding an email, and you always forward it to the creative director because you don't understand the feedback. The feedback is to the creative director, right? Like, tell the client to send it to the creative director and just put you on CC. Simple as that, for example, right? But usually it's not that simple. Usually, if you don't understand the information that you're given, you're doing something wrong. As a producer, you should know what you're doing. You should know what the project is about. You should know what the specialists are actually doing. You can't do their job, usually, like almost always, you can't do their job, but you need to at least understand the problem, understand what they're doing. And thus, you can, for example, if something is very vague, this is a common thing actually in our company sometimes. The client sends a very vague feedback, and I know it's vague, but I'm like, maybe the team will do something with it, right? Maybe they'll understand better. And I forward that feedback, and the first thing that comes back is, yeah, it's too vague, ask a specific question to the client, right? You could already done that. You could already deliver a specific information to the team. That is your job. For example, I could multiply examples, but I think that you get the gist out of it, that if you're not contributing to the information, then remove yourself from the equation. But that's not the baddest kind of a producer. We're getting to the good stuff. Spreadsheet producer, or Mr. and Mrs. Excel. That's, I think, second or third most hated after Nazi producer, which I will get to further. So, Mr. Spreadsheet is focusing on the tool. He read a book that Scrum is great. I did that. I did that back in my dogfight 9042 days. I read a book and I thought, oh my God, this solves all our problems. We just need to implement this tool to the letter, enforce it on the team, and all our problems will go away. And it usually doesn't work that way. I mean, it never works that way, right? Because it's just a tool. And the tool needs to be adjusted to the kind of people you're dealing with, mostly, to the type of project you're doing, to the company culture, to how are things usually run in a company. It's very, very hard to change ways that have been laid out for many years, for example, in a company. Back in CI Games, when I implemented Scrum, with the help of another producer, Oleg, it took us half a year to go from waterfall. I don't know if you know waterfall, but old school project management methodology, like dating back from the building industry, like airports and highways, which like 15 and 20 years ago, it was really a big hit that we implemented those project management procedures into video game development. And funny enough, making video games is not like making highways. So, so then the agile boomed, right? So in every book it says that you're either using Scrum or you're not using Scrum. You need to take everything. You need to like change your way of thinking, etc., etc., etc. But at the end of the day, it's a tool. And second thing is, that actually, that's a lesson I had from my business partner, Gregory, is that Excel is very patient. And any tool is very patient. You can make a project possible, any project, any task, in any tool. I mean, give me an Excel file and I will lay you out entire milestone schedule to create an MMORPG with 10 persons, and it will work. It will work. I will say when the beta is going out, I will say when we'll have a vertical slice. It's impossible to actually do, but Excel won't tell you that, right? So yeah, that's the second problem. So if you're using tools without the context, basically you suck. And I don't know if there are any Star Trek Discovery fans out here, but episode number 3. So tool approach is for lackeys, okay? Context is for kings. So basically, everything you implement in a company, in a team, or whatever, needs to be put into context. What type of people are you working with? Maybe they will hate that tool. You think this tool is awesome. But if you have, let's say, 4 senior programmers who universally think that this tool sucks and will sabotage implementation of that tool for a couple of weeks, you will probably not succeed. Because you know what? You're worth a lot less than 4 senior programmers. I think we can all agree on that, right? So your job is to make the team happy. Your job is to make the team work efficiently. So you need to adjust the tool to the team. Maybe, and on the other hand, obviously you need tools. Even if it's a sticky note on your monitor, that's a tool. If it works for your 2-person team, it works for your 2-person team. You don't need Scrumwise or Trello or whatever, right? Maybe you have a 5-person team. Maybe you have distributed development in different cities. Maybe you need some kind of over-internet tool. Maybe. Always adjust the tools to the team, and you need to have the support of the team. And team is people, and people hate change. So you always will hit some kind of resistance, but you cannot force it, right? If you force it, if you don't have the support of your team, usually you will fail. Or it will take a really long time. It took me half a year to change from waterfall to agile. And obviously agile is better than waterfall, but now I would go about it a very different, less radical way. And another thing is, about the Excel is patient thing, one of the hardest things as a producer, and I'm sure that every producer had this problem here, and actually every specialist had this problem here, is that the producer is asking for an estimate, right? And you have no idea. It's like, you're doing this for the first time. I mean, obviously you have, let's say, 6 years of experience, you've done other stuff, you can extrapolate on that knowledge and try to give an estimate, but it won't be accurate. It will have some kind of flaw inside it, right? Maybe it won't if it's something that you're doing over and over again, but then you're not doing a project, right? A project itself, a definition of the project is that you're doing something unique. So if you're doing something unique, you don't have the knowledge how to do it, right? You don't have all the data. But a shout out to info to all the specialists out there. Your estimate is better than ours, and we will put some estimate in the Excel file. Right, we'll do that because we need to have at least a vague understanding on how big of a problem or a challenge we're facing. So give producers some rope and give an estimate. We know your estimate sucks, but it's better than ours, right? So you need to factor in the human factor, but it's not going to work always, but it's better than not estimating, because it's done when it's done is not an answer, okay? Maybe some companies can have the luxury of such approach, but most company working in a commercial environment, like, it's done when it's done, it's not an estimate. Okay, specialist know-it-all producer. So that's a producer who used to be a specialist. For example, like me, I used to be a programmer. And now he's a producer, but he knows what programming is all about, right? And he loves to shove it into other programmers' face or other artists' face or whatever. It's like, because I'm an artist or I'm a programmer or whatever. So the problem is that you tell people what to do. You act like a lead programmer, for example, right? Or a technical director. Talking from the programmer side, translated to whatever division you're working on in the video game industry. But in 99% of cases, your skill sucks compared to the people you're handling, right? Because that's why you're a producer. For the last couple of years, you're producing. Your programming knowledge is probably outdated, or art knowledge, or whatever. Maybe you have a good eye, maybe you have a good idea. Giving feedback is always fine. But telling people how to do things usually makes them just pissed off, right? That's the main idea. Because they are doing it 8 hours a day for the last couple of years, right? They are better at it than you. Obviously, there are exceptions. You can have a junior team. You could be a 10-year experienced programmer who just started producing, etc. There are exceptions, but in general, you should give people. I will mention that also later. Yeah. So if you do it, you suck. You give. That is. In this presentation, a must-have. So you should use your knowledge for understanding the problem, because actually you have an upper hand comparing other producers. I mean, for example, there are many producers. I don't know how many here in the house here tonight, but many producers are, for example, ex-IT managers, right? Or managers of whatever other field. So they are more impaired than you because they don't know the process, they don't know how to make video games, so they have tougher on them. You're actually ahead, you're already a specialist, you already knew how to make video games, you understand the process, and you could use that knowledge to understand the problems of your team. Not to tell them how to solve problems, but to understand those problems and help them to create an environment to solve those problems. So, and basically, usually, in video game development, you want to hire ambitious people, right? Smart, ambitious people, that's who we like to think we are. So they don't like to be given a solution, they like to be given a problem. And if the problem is laid out, straight and fair, then it's their job to solve it. Okay, so this producer is the hardest one to explain, right? I heard nightmare stories about prison experiments, etc. Like prisoners and guards, right? The Margo experiment, etc. And actually use an example of producers' work in some companies. And also, back in Dogfight 9042, we crunched like crazy for many months and many hours. So I exactly know like what it's like. And so what's the problem? The problem is that you feel that you're put in a position of power, and you, in the eyes of your team, you abuse it. Even sometimes you don't have the power, it's an imaginary power. But still you think you're some kind of a big shot because you have a producer on your business card. So that's one problem. But the second problem is that crunch is the answer for freaking everything, right? It's like, if you have a problem, just throw some time at it, and the problem will go away. Like, can you come on the weekend? Like, that solves the problem. And obviously, that sucks. Obviously for me, because I know that for many companies, like, hey, you cannot make a passionate project without crunching, which is utter bullshit, I think, so, personally. Okay, so what's the problem here? If you're a producer on such a project and you behave this way, it's like, you might say in a violent way, asking everybody to crunch. Violence, like everything else, comes from fear and from lack of control, right? And that's the same thing with a producer. Imagine for a second being in our skin. We usually, as a producer in a big company, where there's CEO, there's like executive producers, money comes from upstairs, deadlines comes from upstairs, the genre of the game comes from upstairs, expectations of the game come from upstairs. You have control over nothing. There's this triangle of quality, time, and cost, and you have control of none of them. You cannot increase the budget as a producer, usually in a company. You can nag the CEO a bit, but you don't have the actual power to make a decision, right? You cannot change the deadline, and usually you cannot change the quality, meaning the cost of the project, right? Because there are certain qualities to be met. So you don't have any tools at your disposal to help people deliver a project on time, on budget, and in quality. So what you do, you ask them to crunch, because that's the only tool that your boss gave you. So that's actually is not your fault. That's like a stupid way of doing things in a company. That's a company's problem. It's also hell not a team's problem, right? It's a company problem. So what you can do is, even if you are in such a situation, you should be very smart about how you use your time. Because often than not, in many projects that I work with, there's this like panic mode in the team, is that we have a problem, so we're throwing resources at it. We're not thinking about how to fix the problem, we're just using up time. It makes us feel better. It's like, yeah, I asked the programmer to spend a weekend over it, so like I did everything I could, right? The problem here is that usually if you step back from a problem and you like not trying to fix it actually, but try to figure out, for example, for a day, take a leave of absence or whatever, and for a day think about ways we can approach this problem differently, right? Not hiring another 10 programmers, but trying to solve it like elegantly. One of my bosses by GIC Games described it very cool, is that we try to solve all our problems like Hawk. We see a problem and we rush at it and try to like force the wall down or something like that, right? Usually thinking about how to solve a problem can cut down drastically on the time you need to use on a project, right? Not mentioning the fact that it's scientifically proven that in a creative environment, crunching, doing overtime, and especially if you pay for crunch, is totally uneconomical. It is like your team efficiency goes down, it's proven, and your cost goes up, right? If you pay for overtime. If you don't pay for overtime, don't get me started. What's wrong with that? But from the business perspective, crunch doesn't make sense. Okay, so be smart about using time. And second of all, try to be a Dan, okay? Because what usually happens is that your CEO or your boss, your executive producer, or whatever, is trying to force you to do everything in your power to fix it. Hint, he wants you to ask the team to crunch, okay? So what you should do is you need to be the dam, right? You need to protect the team from that approach. Maybe it will get you fired, but hey, you won't suck as a producer. So you need to explain that, yeah, we did this, and this. The plan is that, and that. We're approaching the problem smart. Everything's in control. I will give you an update in a week, right? But don't mention the fact that no, people are not going to work on the weekend. You don't need to mention that. Maybe he will think it's implied. So yeah, be a Dan. Next one is a creative producer, also known as, I played a game yesterday, or my nephew played a game yesterday, and I have this idea, it's awesome for a project. So what's the problem? You give feedback, which is awesome. Giving feedback is always good. And you expect it to be used, which is not that good, right? Because giving feedback there's not a necessary correlation between giving feedback and implementing that feedback 100% of the time. So if you expect that, you act as a product owner, basically, then you suck as a producer because that's not your job. You can give feedback, that's cool, but first of all, make sure you're not doing it from the position of power, okay? Like saying things like, I think it's a good idea and I think we should do this at the start of the sprint plan when you're a producer and the team doesn't have the guts, because this is the culture you created, to say no to you, you suck as a producer, right? Giving ideas is awesome. Forcing the ideas, because you're from a position of power, is very, very bad. But as I said before, giving feedback is really good. Because for example, we all have been in this meeting. Everybody here in video game development has been to a meeting. There's like 10%, everybody agrees on everything. We say, hey, yeah, we're doing this game. And there's always this one guy, right? Yeah, because I played this game yesterday, and I think we should do that. and everybody like internally feels it's a shitty idea. Everybody knows that this idea is freaking stupid. But for example, it's a producer who says that, right? And you're not gonna say in his face that he's an idiot, and you shouldn't, because it's a great conversational starter, not ender. So if you're giving feedback and leaving the room, you're doing it wrong. If you're giving the feedback and it starts a discussion, it's an awesome way, for example, to describe to the producer what we're actually doing here and make him understand why his idea is really stupid, right? Obviously not using those words, I'm exaggerating, but most bad feedback doesn't come from lack of experience or the fact that we're idiots, right? We're usually smart people. It comes from the fact that we have a different construct about the game we're creating in our head. And that's the biggest producer problem ever. Communication about what actually game we're creating. And the bigger the team is, the harder it gets. I have no idea how CD Projekt Red enforces a coherent vision on 400 people. I really know why Ubisoft makes quite simple in the vision games, because they're making it with thousands of people, right? And they need to understand what they're doing. They need to have the same coherent vision of the project. So giving stupid feedback is an awesome way to correct that, to make, again, a coherent construct in your head of what game you're creating, so that everybody can be on the same page. I think that this single thing is one of the most important things for creative directors and producers. Does the team know what they're doing in terms of everybody has the same idea about the game they're creating in their head? And you'll be surprised, because you pitch a project at the beginning of the project, and 3 months later everybody's thinking that they're making something else. Those visions are different in every individual. So you need to always use this time to try to create a single coherent vision. And the next one, which is, for example, me on our last project, Detached, a CEO producer. So a producer who's a producer, product owner, because it's like he distributes the money, he has the actual power to change budgets, to change deadlines, to change the scope of the project, and he's a producer on the project, right? So the problem is that you have real power, and actually you can be a great producer. Let's assume for a second that you don't suck, but you will. And you will because you're a CEO, and you won't have your full attention in the project. So I heard thousands of stories, and I'm sure that my people told these stories about me, that they're doing something for a month, and then the CEO enters, and he plays a game for 5 minutes, and he says, no, that's not shit, let's change that and that, and he leaves. And he's not there for the next 3 months, right? But he's the CEO, so you need to implement that feedback. You cannot like cover it up. He actually has the power to do it. And that's a big problem, because if you cannot focus yourself, even if you're a great producer, or a great creative director, or whatever, and I'm not a great creative director, if you don't have 100% focus on the project, you shouldn't be a producer of the project, right? So you suck very hard at being a producer of the project. And so obviously you can simply, not do this. That's option number one. Option number two, you can be the Cliff Bleszinski style. He gave a talk on Respawn last year, no, 2 years ago, sorry, about being a creative CEO. And he talked for 45 minutes, but I will put you on to one thing, like hire a person who will do all the CEO things for you. That was the gist of it. So he called him a CEO, for example, like a chief operational officer or whatever. All the things that you do usually as a CEO, give it to somebody else and be actually a producer. So be a CEO only on your business card. This could work, but you need to actually put in time, right, into the project. And I know that we're struggling, for example, with that in Unsure Studios, right? We have a dedicated producer for some projects, and I'm a producer for some projects. And obviously, I'm an arrogant guy, so I think I'm a great producer, and I know that I'm not doing a good enough job, and that the dedicated producer is doing a better job, right? And because he's dedicated, she actually, to that particular thing. So to summarize, if I could summarize like my entire knowledge about being a producer from my experience, is that the team usually thinks that you're this quirky guy that's like at best not helping, at best, and that's okay. If team thinks you're useless, but the project moves forward and everything's fine, that's okay. You're supposed to be, in that terms, invisible, in that terms, useless. Now, your boss usually hopes that if he sends you in, you'll be leading the charge and everything will be fine. And that's why sometimes the splendor falls on the producers, which is usually should not be the case, because actually the team is making the game. But we like to think of ourselves, and I heard that a lot because we're arrogant, we're like Mr. Wolf, right? We solve problems. Like we go in and we solve problems, we make shit happen. Which for the most part is true, but we're not half as cool as Mr. Wolf. So what I think we actually do, we do two things. First thing, we're a shepherd dog. So we run around people and try to make them go in one direction. Okay, so that's like, I think 25% of a producer's job is to make the sheep go in one direction. That's thing number one. Thing number two, if there's a problem, we need to fix it. If there's a problem that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with a specialist field, like a design, programming, or art, or music, whatever. If the problem is that there's no power, it's your problem. If there's no pizza, it's your problem. If somebody is sick and he didn't notify everybody, it's your problem. I mean, any problem is your problem. That's basically the thing. And for the 75% of time, you'll be unplugging the communications pipelines in the project, right? Because this is usually what fails, communication pipelines in the project. That's 75% of the job of a producer. And I know that it's maybe not so glorified. I mean, this is way cooler. So maybe let's like finish with this. But yeah, that's what I think producers should do. And now there's, like to summarize, there are like two things happening here. If the team doesn't necessarily see you succeed as a producer, that's okay, that's great. But if the team can definitely put you into one of those stereotype brackets, then you probably suck at something and probably you need to fix that, right? And the problem is that because we're managing people and unique projects, like all those 10 things you need to do as a producer things are useless because every situation is unique. Truly, I read many books about being a producer. I wanted actually to give you some like good references. There are none because they're personal experiences of some people that work in their particular environment and won't necessarily work in yours. So you need to like bring up your own tens, don'ts, and do's in your particular project. So sorry for not laying out this like awesome scheme to not to suck as a producer. I think maybe some of you hope for that, and there are some really high-level producers here in the house. Thank you for that. But yeah, that's me. That's what producers do. Thank you. Slides are in the URL. My Twitter is Łukasz Hacura. Follow me if you want. And if you have any questions, now's the time. Thank you. Okay. Turn on.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about making sure that everybody is going into the right direction. So I know about several things like waterfall or agile to making sure that the project is going in the right direction. And what would you advise to a producer? How he or she would communicate with the team that everybody knows what they are doing, what others are doing, and like after a few months they,
Yeah, so no tool is going to solve that problem. Actually, waterfall and agile are like methodologies, right? Project management methodologies that we usually use to like estimate, give out tasks, etc., right? To give an idea where the project is going to end, and so on. And usage of those tools, like the sense of using a particular tool may differ from company to company, culture to culture, etc. So there's no like one silver bullet, but it has nothing to do with making sure that everybody's on the same page. And actually, also many senior producers and creative directors say that there is no tool to do that. I mean, nobody reads the documentation, nobody reads the shit. I mean, maybe a design team read their documentation, but usually if you have, for example, an artist, a programmer, and an artist, and a designer for the last 2 weeks on a sprint that was creating a document, nobody read that. Maybe they skimmed over the headlines or something like that. And you cannot force that. You cannot force it. It's proven nobody reads your documents, okay? So it comes from a creative director from Naughty Dog, it comes from creative director from Ubisoft, for really big hitters, and they all say face-to-face communication and always be pitching. You're not pitching what you're doing at the beginning of the project. You're pitching what you're doing every single day, every single meeting, every single sprint review or planning. You pitch face-to-face what you're doing. Producers just need to make sure that that's happening. It's more of a creative lead role to pitch his idea, right? It's like it's his baby, his project. But that's the only way to do it. Face-to-face and reiterated communication.
okay, thanks.
Hi. You said that you were a programmer and you are now a producer. My question is, what skills were you lacking when you were starting your job as a producer? Which skills you had to develop, and what skills you think would be good to develop further or new skills that are required for a producer that came from other field, okay, from a specialist field?
So I became a producer because I didn't have communication problems. I mean, I thought I didn't have. Some say I might have. But basically, I'm not a like shy person or something like that, so that helps. But I had no idea. First off, the toughest challenge, it was back in Dogfight 1942 days, was that specialists in video game development think differently. And programmers, I mean, I have absolutely no problems talking to a programmer because I'm a programmer myself. I was a programmer, and I can talk to them. I know how they think, I understand their problems, I understand what they're saying, right? I have no freaking idea what artists are saying. None, right? And they think differently, and they are different. It's being composers, being sound designers, art, 3D art, 2D art, whatever. It was really hard for me to like change my approach to like treat different departments differently because they are different, they think differently. That was, I think, the biggest challenge. Actually, the half year I mentioned before, changing from waterfall to agile, programmers, it took me 2 weeks, something like that, maybe 3. Designers followed in 2 or 3 weeks. The half a year was for the artists. So I'm not saying, let me clarify, I'm not saying that it's something wrong with artists. I'm saying that I think differently than them, and I needed to learn that, right? Thankfully, I have a business partner, Chris, who is an technical artist, so he helps me a lot in the lingo, etc. But yeah, I didn't know the pipelines and the lingo and the way of thinking of the art, so that's one thing. Yeah, I think that's the. I mean, I could go on, but you know, that was the most important thing. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? We have one here. Now I'm scared.
Okay, hi. I have a quick question about a team without a producer. We are working now in a company. Our team already has like about 10 people, and we are doing full scrum, so sprint meetings, daily stand-ups to make sure everybody's on the same page to know what we are doing if we have any problems. We have a product owner that collects the sprint at the end, and we talk with him what we'll do in the next sprint. And I just wanted to ask you, what do you think the pitfalls may be when we try to do it without a person that is strictly a producer? And what do you think if there is a way?
I mean, you do have a producer, but it's like you do have producer-like roles, but it's distributed, right, throughout the team. I'm sure of that. A lot of things that a normal producer would do, your product owner does. That's one thing. Second of all, do you have a scrum master or not?
Not yet. We try to develop a Scrum Master right now. We thought about a new person that we hired that is doing the tests right now. We are slowly trying to make him be a Scrum Master.
The problem is that with a 10-person team, like a full-time Scrum Master is an overkill, right? I mean, with 10-person's team, I think a Scrum Master can handle easily like 3 teams, something like that, easily. Because Scrum Master is only like a master of ceremony. So he has a lot of things I'm saying about in the production side, because he makes sure that everybody's on the same page, and he removes obstacles for the team. So all those cumbersome things about like making sure that the burnout charts are working or whatever, or all those Scrum ceremonies that you have, he makes sure everybody knows when there's a meeting. He makes sure that the backlog is cleaned up. He discusses with product owner. He makes sure that everybody updates their task, which they usually don't do, etc., right? So a Scrum Master is like, think of a Scrum Master, and actually think of a producer in a way that he's a guy or a girl who contributes 0% to the project, 0% of like contribution to the project, but when he's around, he adds like plus 10% to the specialists, right? So the more specialists you have, the bigger the increase of the efficiency will be, right? That's his role, because his role is to uncloud communication, his role is to improve the quality of work for others, so that you are not thinking about things that are not related strictly to video game development. So for example, you need a producer or you need a Scrum Master if, for example, some of your specialists are frustrated with how much time they spend on the Scrummy things, right? For example. If there is this kind of a frustration, maybe you need a Scrum Master. If there's not, if it works, you don't need a like specialized producer-only person for a 10-person team that works in Scrum and has a product owner and nobody complains about the Scrum itself, right? So maybe you will need a Scrum Master. Maybe somebody from the team can partially do the Scrum Master things, because as I said, full-time Scrum Master for a 10-person team is like overkill. But yeah, that's how I think you should approach it in the future. But you don't need like a dedicated producer if you have a product owner and you have a working Scrum methodology implemented.
All right, thanks.
Hey, here.
So, hi. I'm curious about this making artists work in Agile. I mean, it's super hard. We all
I killed myself with this one, right?
yeah, and you know, of course, and you know, they just don't like to work like that. I mean, they don't like sprints. They just naturally work in waterfall, Kanban at best. right? So did you actually make them work in Agile, or did you just give up and make them, let them go?
Okay, so what actually happened is at CI Games, we actually developed two teams. We divided artists into two teams. One was the Agile team, and they were the feature persons who are actually engaged in developing a particular system or a feature. So they were required to be a part of a sprint because there was a programmer and a designer assigned to this feature, right? But most of them just developed content, right? And developing content is like, it's not an agile way of doing things. So like Kanban or Lean or whatever waterfall you use, it's better. So yeah, we had an entire team that were just doing content, right? Because having a angry artist on a daily meeting saying, I was creating a model, I'm creating a model, and I will create a model. That's not a good thing to have, right? So that's what we did in CI Games. And Onshore Studios is actually quite quirky because in Onshore Studios we have many projects. But for example, my business partner Chris, he developed the 3D team in a kind of in-house outsourced team, you might say. I mean, he has resources, right? And requests are coming in from all projects around. And he discusses internally who might do that inside. So actually it's like this black box that we put in a request and it shoots out assets, usually, right? The problem with that approach is it's super optimal because resources are usually at 100% capacity all over. So it's really good. And nobody's bored that they have nothing to do on a particular sprint or whatever. But the drawback of that is you don't have this like awesome feeling of contribution and being united in a project that, yeah, we're doing this together. No, it's like, yeah, from that particular project somebody said I should do a model, right? So you don't have that ownership with the project. So that's a drawback out of it.
But you still decided that's a better way to do this.
Yeah, the thing is that it's very connected to the type of a person a particular artist is. Because we do have a couple of artists, our art director, for example, maybe some 2D people that are engaged, that they're like, they have this agile way of thinking and they want to contribute also a little bit on the scope design side of the project. So if they want to, we allow them. But if they don't want to, and many don't, usually the senior old grumpy guys that are doing their thing, we don't force them. It's like, okay, he's doing his thing, he's awesome at it, leave him be. So yeah, I'm not saying that we have this 100% Scrum and then 20% Lean. No, it's very like, try to adjust the workflow to the people so that it's not, makes them the least angry. And let's just give you in a perspective of that. We recently switched from Skype to Slack. Now who thinks here, and Onshore Studios, because I know there's a lot of you here, are forbidden to vote. Who here thinks that Skype is better than Slack? Yep, that's what I thought. The amount of bitching we have in the company about Slack is like, well, it worked, Skype was awesome. It's like, why would the colors in Slack suck? So yeah, and I was just imitating our artist. So basically, we try to enforce as little change and abstractions to their way of working as possible. It's not always possible, and as everybody's happy, we still have Slack. But yeah. Anybody else? Got like 5 minutes, and that's it. Nobody? Awesome. Coffee time. Okay, thank you very much.